Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Arne Kittlund. I'm co-founder and managing director at Carbon Minds. And today we're going to talk about the end of sustainability reporting season, how to improve Scope 3 data quality in chemicals for the next cycle. This is an on-demand webinar, but like in a live webinar, you can still use the chat function. You can ask us questions. You can comment on what you're seeing. We will be in touch shortly after via email. And if you're working in sustainability reporting or in corporate sustainability, you probably know the situation. You've just worked on your sustainability report for months. And as the dust settles on this massive effort, as the submissions close to auditors, to internal stakeholders, or for public publication, the feedback cycle opens. And this is often when the real work begins for the next cycle. You receive questions from quite a lot of different people. So your auditors might ask you, hey, can you explain the data gaps? Please work on your data coverage for the next year's audit. You might have questions from internal stakeholders who say, well, the data that you're using in some parts here, it's so generic that it really doesn't reflect our real world supply chains. How can we make decisions based on this? How can we find reduction options? You might get questions from financial accounting who say, well, sustainability data is set to move much closer to financial accounting, but you don't have the same levels of certainty, of checks in your data. Is your data even certified? And then, of course, there's your management who would like to achieve the climate targets. And they might ask you, well, are we sure that our base year calculation is still accurate? There have been a lot of changes in the energy system, in the supply chain. Do we really account for these emission reductions? And these are all important questions, which are often the basis for improvements in the next year. And at the same time, these are the questions that we at Carbon Minds focus on when we build our database and improve it for Scope 3 accounting. In short, we say it's a Carbon Minds database, but it's really a bit more than just a database. It's a Carbon Minds data system. And this data system consists of two components. It's our Carbon Minds database, which is currently the world's largest or most comprehensive lifecycle database, specifically for chemicals and plastics. It has more than 130,000 processes, represents more than 1,500 chemicals, goes down to a level of granularity that it even includes supplier-specific data and all this in all production regions worldwide. Yeah, so it's really a big database. But if you really look into how many chemicals are used out there in industry, this number will be much higher. So even with this large database, there will always be data gaps that still exist. And this is why we introduced our advanced data services, which are an integral part of our work with our customers with the database. And these services help you map the data with your internal system. It helps you to identify and to close data gaps through our modeling approaches, where we specifically model chemicals for you, and to find proxies for those data gaps that don't matter too much for the results. So let's have a closer look into this and start with the database. This is a typical example of what you find in our database. Yeah, it's the example for propylene production, and we start with the industry average, the consumption mix worldwide. And as you can see in this graph, the environmental impacts, or here the carbon footprint of propylene, depends a lot on where it's produced, or in this case, the consumption mix, where it's consumed. Results range from about 1 kilogram of CO2 equivalent to much more than 3 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. So if you compare this to the global average, or if you use the global average, your internal colleagues might be right that your data is too generic, because if you look only into country averages, you can see it might be 50% lower or almost drive the carbon footprints. Yeah. So I think there's a need to dig deeper. And this is possible with a database, and I would like to show this to you using the example of China. So if we look into China, and specifically into propylene production, we can see there's not one propylene production technologies. There are quite a number of different technologies used not at pilot stage on fancy projects, no, really at world scale plant capacities. And depending on what technology you might use different feedstocks, you might use different processes, and these lead to completely different environmental impacts. And here, the difference is even much bigger, ranging, around a factor 10 in between technologies. And of course, there are different suppliers in China. And in this new graph, every single one of these columns represents the carbon footprints of one propylene supplier in China. You can see that their mix of technologies used not only in the last technology, but along the entire supply chain really matters, so that there are massive differences among the suppliers, even in the same country. And this is the data that your internal colleagues might mean when they say, well, global averages are too generic. It does not necessarily reflect our supply chain. Yeah. So you can use more specific data to really reflect your supply chain. And this view really opens up starting points for emission reductions in supply chain management. And this was just one example chemical of many, many in our database. Yeah, but you get a first impression. If you now move to the other side, to the advanced data services, what does this mean? Well, it's a stepwise procedure to get as high as possible data coverage for your Scope 3 inventory. And the first step is that we basically collect CAS numbers from you, basically CAS numbers from all the chemicals that you need for your Scope 3 reporting, and then we map it with our database. Yeah, very simple. And in this step, we often get quite a number of direct matches. So basically substances that are already available in our database, where you just need to choose the right region, and if you have this information, the right technology, or even the right suppliers for those chemicals where this information is available. But as I said, there will always be data gaps remaining that we need to close. And as a next step, we map your data needs against our own modeling pipeline. So as you can imagine, as a database developer, we are constantly collecting data, also on chemicals that are not yet included in our database, because we expand our database quite quickly. Yeah, and here we have different data sources. Of course, we have data sources where we can get high quality data. We have process modeling capabilities in the company, and we have advanced tools such as retrosynthesis tools, which we combine with process modeling. And with this infrastructure of tools, we can very easily find out if the missing chemical is something that we can quickly include in the database, or if it's more complicated. And if we can quickly include it, we can include it in this step 2, so that our customers often get the data that was missing included in the database without additional cost. And this data will be maintained in all the future updates. And if still data gaps remain, and with large numbers of inventories, we always go through all the different steps, we do something which I called impact-based decisions. And this is a big name for something very simple. So we basically ask ourselves, with this data gaps, the substances that we're looking on, is it likely to have a big impact on our Scope 3 assessment? And if this is the case, we need high data quality. And there we can offer our custom service. So our experts, not taking the data from one of the data sources that we directly have at hand, we checked this in the step before, but really starting the modeling to generate new data and to do LCAs and PCFs. We're quite quick in this, but this is much more time intensive compared to the modeling pipeline from step 2. And then if we say, okay, this is a data gap which is likely to have a very low impact on our Scope 3 accounting, for example, because only very small quantities of the substances are used, then we can use our proxy engine, which uses algorithms which compare the molecular structure of the chemical that you are looking for with the molecular structure of the chemicals that we have included in our database. It quantifies the similarity and gives us the most similar molecule, which is often a very good starting point for the selection of proxies, which then would need to be checked by an expert again. Yeah, but if we run through these steps, we nearly always get exceptional data quality to what you're used for, so that we can get an improvement in coverage and often also massive improvement in quality. Talking about quality, well, this is where financial colleagues might get in again with a question, well, is it certified? Yeah, everything that we do is, first of all, compliant with the relevant standards for your industry. For chemicals, Together for Sustainability is a leading standard. For lubricants, the standard for UL and ATIL. For European lubricants producers, those are all standards that we are compliant with. Of course, also the ISO standards. And we're not just compliant with this, our compliance is certified by the TÜV Rheinland and recertified periodically, usually on an annual basis, whenever we do an update. Yeah, so you can be sure that we are not just closing data gaps, but we can close it with trusted quality assessments and trusted quality. So to come back with the questions, well, I think our system is designed to give you answers and starting points for the improvements that your stakeholders might ask for. The auditors who ask for better data quality, which directly or massively relates to the quality of your Scope 3 inventory, you can tell them, well, we map this against the world's largest lifecycle database for chemicals and plastics, plus the advanced modeling services, which usually help increase data coverage, as again drastically against the database. You have your internal teams who say, well, this data is too generic. No, the data won't be too generic anymore. For the large volume chemicals, we can go down to all the different technologies, to even the different suppliers. And for all chemicals, we can generate the country-specific data for all the production regions worldwide. Your financial accountants who ask for certification, they can be satisfied because the data is certified by TÜV Rheinland and compliant with the leading standards. And finally, when your management asks, well, is our base year correct? This is also not the end of the discussion. No, it's the beginning of the discussion, because this is something we can do not off the shelf, but as an additional service that we can do the base year calculations according to the latest versions of the relevant standards. If that sounds interesting to you, please feel free to decide if you would like to have follow-up steps. We would very happy to talk to you directly in the meeting. If you prefer to have information on this, just click on the information part. Or if you say, well, this webinar was a good start for me, but that's enough for now, of course, that's equally fine. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention and hope to get in touch soon.